Hello, welcome back to our weekly sessions. And today's session, I had intentionally decided to keep it as a, what do you call it, as an open question answer session because I was getting quite a few questions and I will hope to answer those and any new questions from you. And I already have a few questions that I will address in a minute, but let me welcome all of you who are here today, and then we'll go into. So we have Naomi. She is our new channel member. Welcome to our weekly conversation. We have Infinita who has come in. Thank you so much for joining us from Spain. And Infinita has been a regular member of our weekly webinars, and I'm deeply grateful for that. And Naomi, welcome. Okay, so before I open the stage for questions, I already have a few questions that people had sent to me. And so while you come and join us, I will just go to those questions and take a look at them and put them on the screen. And then tackle them slowly. So let me first put up the first question. And this, I'm not putting people's names here because I'm not sure if they would like me to use their names in the questions. But if you are here and joining us, and if this is your question, feel free to augment it. And this is from someone who says, I'm writing a paper on Orientalism. However, I got confused about how to address it. How do I apply Orientalism as a theoretical framework? Now, the simple answer to that is it will depend on, first of all, the scope of your paper. I mean, how long is the paper? Is it a term paper or is it a master's thesis? What you cannot do is say in your opening statement that I will apply Orientalism to this novel. No, I mean, Orientalism is too huge a concept. So what I would suggest to start with is you introduce your idea by suggesting that in Orientalism, Said discusses X, Y, Z. He discusses the creation of colonial identities, whatever you want to pick specifically in Said's own argument. And then that becomes your tool, because just as Said explains this in Orientalism, I would like to use the same kind of framework to read this, right? Or Said mentions these, and these as Orientalist tropes. I would like to suggest that if we keep that in mind, we can read this novel as a new form of Orientalist discourse. So you can't just say Orientalism is my term, because it's not necessarily a term. It is a concept, but it's also a practice. And in order to make that claim, you will have to first explain what do you mean by Orientalism. And this applies to all theories, by the way. And I do highly recommend that you should watch my video on how to use theory to write a paper, or how to just come up with a paper topic. Those videos are available on my channel. Okay, so if you are here and you pose this question, I'll be happy to answer further. Let me welcome some more people, and then we'll go from there, and I'll go to the next question. So Owais is here from Pakistan. Tanveer Hussain recently joined my channel. Great, thank you and welcome. And then Benny Watson, good morning from Jamaica. Thank you for joining us. So as you keep coming in, I will keep welcoming you, but I will also go to the next question. And meanwhile, if you have any research questions or questions about theory, which fall within my range of expertise, I'll be very happy to answer them. So the next question was, I think this was from a veteran. I hope you are here. If you are not, then I will refer you to this video when it is posted as an edited version. And it is that I'm looking at offering a decolonizing approach to U.S. military interventions by examining internal aspects of U.S. military culture. How do I frame it theoretically? So my understanding of this question was that you're taking 3 exams, and one of them asks you to look at post 9/11 identities, especially the US military. So, in order to do that study, of course, what you will have to have access to is the identity forming practices of the US military. What are their training manuals? How are they used? How are people trained to view themselves as soldiers? Then you can also go into the discourse of masculinity that's in so many ways underwrites a certain fighting force, maybe the Marines and others. How do they come to view themselves the way they do? So your ideal tool would be then the discursive framework which these people internalize, how they are trained, what they believe in, and how does masculinity play a role on it. Now, there is a wonderful book on the Marine Corps and their involvement in Haiti, and it's by the scholar's last name is Renda, Renda, and the book is called Taking Haiti. And that's a great example of studying the evolution of Marine Corps from the president's troops to the current day Marine. And it relies on the discourses of identity that Smedley Butler, the first commandant of Marine Corps, and others employed in defining what constitutes the Marines. So that would be my suggestion for you, my veteran brother. So, but if you're here and if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. Okay, Mary, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. So I have another announcement too, and that is that after today, we will move back to our post-colonialism class and discuss it. But these webinars, I'm only going to do the first 3 Saturdays as open webinars. And then the 4th Saturday would always be what I have promised to the channel members. And Mary, you are one of them, especially greater members and above. You can see the gradation in the join button. So 4th week, every Saturday, I will keep the same time for the channel members, people who support our channel. And the announcement will always be made in the community, under the community tab in the channel. So the first 3 Saturdays will be for our open classes, and the 4th week for our supporting members of the channel. So welcome back. And now the floor is open. I think I've partially answered the 2 questions that had come to me from 2 different subscribers to the channel. And if you have any questions about theory, about research, or anything that you're working on, please feel free to post them in the comments. And if I have the ability to answer them, I will try to answer them. So while you're coming up with that, do keep in mind that I am constantly developing more and more materials on the channel, and most of that is driven by your suggestions. So the more you comment on the videos and let me know what precisely is that I can do to support you all, the better it would be, for all of us. But it kind of helps me focus more and guide, not necessarily on what I want to do, but what the general needs are, out there, depending on if I have expertise in it or not. So, okay, so Benny Watson, thank you. Let me put your question up here. I'm trying to apply a post-colonialism to the practice and production of tourism in the Caribbean. That's a really good idea. So what you want to do is, if you are from Jamaica, you have probably watched Life and Debt, right? Stephanie White's movie, Life and Debt. If not, you can watch that. But what you can do is read anything on neoliberalism, right? Neoliberal globalization, how it works, in which What you are trying to highlight is that even though these economies like the Caribbean and elsewhere are encouraged to develop their tourism industry, the colonial aspect of it is that, it's then what you're basically asking these nations is to become these service heavy nations so that they create spaces that still cater to the whims and privileges of Americans and others. And that is kind of a subservient role. And then people are trained in that subservient role because they work at those places. And so, a wonderful example of I will later, when I post the edited version of the book, I will suggest a couple of books that would be very helpful to you. But for right now, I would say that if you're going to use post-colonial theory, Jamaica Kincaid's work, right, on the Caribbean would be great. But any neoliberal critiques of neoliberal globalization that focus on the issues of comparative advantage and what does it involve, or the movement of service industry jobs to the developing countries would be a good opening point for you. Okay, Anum, welcome. So, yes, absolutely. Like post-colonialism is not necessarily a theory, it's also a praxis, right? Because there are nations in the world that still live within a post-colonial framework of power. So you can absolutely inform your research with your own lived experience, with your own observations. And to me, post-colonialism isn't just a theoretical framework. It is the way the world is. And I think that will work for you. Okay, Tanveer Hussain, I'm going to write a dissertation of about 8,000 words. How does the 8,000 words make a dissertation? That's not even a paper. For my master's degree on the movie, There Will Be Blood, I'm trying to apply master morality by Nietzsche to. Sorry, I can't help you with that because I don't consider myself a scholar on Nietzsche. And I will be kind of just faking it if I try to answer that. But I don't know. We don't write master's dissertations. We do a master's thesis, which is about, 40,000 words. But anyway, this is one thing I'm sorry I won't be able to help you with because, to be very honest, I can't claim any kind of expertise on Nietzsche. And okay, all right. So as I mentioned earlier, most of the questions that I will attempt to answer is the questions that are related to my expertise and in which I can claim some degree of knowledge. So please keep that in mind. Okay, so Anom is here and Mary is here. Anyone else I have not welcomed? Infinita is here. Okay, good. Okay. Okay, so I have a question by Owais. So you have used the term inundation in order to expose metropolitan reader targeted, right? Will you please explain it? There is a video on inundation in my post-colonial concepts videos, but the basic idea was what I was trying to do is that instead of applying any kind of balanced or chronological knowledge to any work of literature, what we need to do is make sure that any work of literature or its reading is not made reductive. So in order to do that, my first argument is that the text is not a point of arrival, it should be a point of departure. So we shouldn't read Midnight's Children to learn about India, right? But when we read it, we should infuse it with so many different knowledges that extrapolating one meaning becomes impossible. And in the process of doing so, we render the text, if not necessarily more complex, at least impossible to reduce through one lens or the other. If you want to see my explanation of the term inundation, if you go to my publications on postcolonial.net, there is an essay on Salman Rushdie, which is open access, and that's where I actually explain the concept better. But there is also a video under the postcolonial concepts list in which I explain it. Okay, so Ram Krishnan, very, very welcome to you. And Hina Mir, welcome back. Mary, you have a question. My work is on the impact of colonialism on indigenous religion using post-colonial. I don't know if post-colonial theory, but if you look into the subaltern studies projects work, the 10 volumes or anything that deals with overwriting of indigenous religions with dominant religious groups will help. But my guess is that the best sources for that will come to you from the Subaltern Studies Collective, especially within the context of India, because that is one area where their research is. And if you put a comment under this video when it goes live later, I will look into my collection of subaltern studies and maybe I'll be able to point out to you which particular essays to read. Okay. Ram Krishnan, I'm planning to do my PhD. I want to apply post-colonial theory on video games. I mean, analyzing them through is this a valid? Yeah, I mean, depends on what kind of video games. And then remember, post-colonial theory is a vast subject, right? So would you be focusing on representation? Would you be focusing on representation of native characters, Indians, others? And depending on what you focus on in a video game, then you should be able to use any of the theories. Are there any Orientalist tropes? What kind of hybridity does exist? What kind of native identities are represented? So depending on what you are reviewing and what particular aspect of it, then you can pick up anything from any of the post-colonial authors. Remember, I'm always discouraging people to use post-colonial theory because it's not one theory, right? So if you're going to use post-colonial theory, then you'll have to figure out which one. Are you going to read Fanon? Are you going to read Said? Are you going to read Spivak? We even include, people like Césaire, Chenwei Zhu, all these people from all over the world. We include them within the realm of post-colonial theory. So pick up which theorist you want to use, why, explain it. Here is why I'm using this particular lens from Baba or mimicry or whatever. Explain that, and then you can apply it to anything. Okay, let me see. Well, I don't know what the difference is between theory and methodology. I mean, the basic difference is methodologies can be different. Methodology can be, in social sciences, if you're an ethnographer, your methodology will be different. If you're an archaeologist, your methodology would be different. If you're an anthropologist, so methodologies are discipline specific, right? Theory, each methodology can have a theory, right? In humanities, the methodology is different. In humanities, most of the times we don't do empirical research, right? Because we have the text and we dwell on the text or we go beyond the text. But our method is we read literary texts or other texts and we try to either prove what they say or what they're about or what impact they can have. So that's the difference between theory and methodology. Methodology can also be the scientific method. So that would be field specific, right? Theory can also be field specific, but you can pick up theory from anthropology and apply it to literature. Marxism is not a literary theory, but so many of us are Marxists. because we use the knowledge from Marxism to read literary texts or to write about literary texts. Malini, how do you describe the contribution post-colonial theory has made to our... Well, I mean, keep in mind, I mean, that knowledge already existed before post-colonialism came to be. I think all post-colonial theory enables us is that makes that central to our inquiry, right? That colonialism, which was previously treated in history or treated in, let's say, social sciences, suddenly becomes a moment in history or a time in history that we now suddenly unpack, write about, trace counter discourses to it. So it then increases our engagement with it. Of course, there are problems with it. The problem is that then the blame on post-colonial theory is that they tend to privilege the colonial experience, which in my opinion is not the case, but it enables us to center around this historical phenomena and see what kind of cultural production happened during that or after that, and then we read and respond to it. So I think that's a great contribution of post-colonial theory and studies as a field. Okay, so I think Owais, I already answered that theory and methodology. Okay, so there's another thing that I need to clarify. Now, I'm not sure about India, but in Pakistan, the way English department papers are being written is not how I am accustomed to writing it or I am accustomed to teaching it. We don't write our dissertations like social science dissertations. So we don't have, here is my hypothesis, and here is my delineation, and here is my literature review, and here is what I would try to prove. We don't write like that in humanities. I'm pretty sure none of the universities in United States at least teach humanities writing like that. What we do is we ask our students to write an introduction, and in the introduction they introduce what theory would they be employing and why, and then they can have a different theoretical approach for different chapters. And then in the introduction, they also lay down what chapters are they writing and how would they be dealing with those chapters. And then each chapter can be a standalone essay, having its own thesis and its own supporting sources, whatever. So I'm always baffled to answer questions about how to write a dissertation to Pakistani students, at least, because I'm not accustomed to writing a dissertation like that. I've never trained anyone to write a dissertation like that. And I think it does the students a disservice to ask them to write a humanities dissertation like a social science dissertation, because if they convert it to a book, there is no publisher who will publish that structure as a book. Have you ever seen any books that say, here is my hypothesis and here are the three scholars I'm going to read, here is my... No. Books have introductions, preface, and then chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. So if students are encouraged to write, I think the way my students do it, or humanities students over here, it's easier for them to transform a dissertation into a book. Okay. So the last question was that, and okay, Hannah had said, welcome back, Hinamir. Okay, so there are the people whose questions I answered in the beginning had said that they will join us, but I don't think so they have. Sometimes the questions are too complex, so I can't answer them in the comments. But overall, if the question is within my grasp as a scholar, then I have no problem in answering the questions. Okay. Any other questions? Because otherwise it's going to be the shortest thing we ever did, because this is relying on your questions. And the only way I can keep it going is if there are questions. Cool. All right. So while you're coming up with the questions, again, what we have decided is that first 3 Saturdays of the week, we will focus on whatever we are doing, postcolonialism course or a webinar every now and then like this. And the fourth Saturday is what I will keep for the channel members, because I promised them that those of them who join at a certain level and above, I will at least offer them one webinar a month. So I'm going to keep the fourth week for them, and all of it will be announced under the community tab of the channel. And meanwhile, I'm hoping you all have any questions. There was another question about how to use theory. So please also keep in mind that the channel, if you go to the playlist under research and pedagogy, there are quite a few already recorded lectures, long and short, about how to write a paper, how to do research, how to come up with a paper topic. I already have recorded videos on that, and that can be a good resource for all of you. I mean, if you just, want a recorded answer. Okay, I have another question here. Good. I have some here. I'm trying to refresh it here. So here is Owais. Can we also decolonize or indigenize research project or theory, and will it be acceptable? It depends on who you are offering it to. To me, absolutely it will be acceptable. But here is the deal. A lot of people who think that they are going to decolonize, there is a difference in how you decolonize. And the decolonize is, you can't just insist on this is my knowledge and I'm going to just use that now. If you want to have an impact in the world, then you insert your knowledge into the dominant discourse or against it. But for that, you must know where the dominant discourse is. You can't just keep, running circles in your own little indigenized world and think it will make a difference. So in order to intervene and decolonize knowledge, you have to first also understand what the colonizing knowledge is. So that decolonization or indigenization must come with that knowledge. Otherwise, you don't even know what you're challenging. Another trap not to fall into is nativism. And what's happening in Pakistan, at least, is indigenization is actually another term for Islamization. So people are recovering Islamic texts, which is a good thing. I do that too. But just offering them as an ultimate answer to world's problems or Pakistan's problems, I think, is a disservice. Now, if you want to go and indigenize Marxism, you go to your local Marxist thought and see how Pakistanis or Indians, rewrote it, re-articulated it. So any kind of indigenization that mobilizes a purist idea of culture would be destructive or nativist, because that's actually not indigenization. That's you going back to a little silo in your culture and saying, this is where I feel safe. It's not going to have any impact in the world. The impact in the world is when you take your knowledge and you juxtapose, which Foucault would call buried knowledge, and you juxtapose it against the dominant knowledge as a viable form of knowledge, and then it becomes challenged to the normalized discourse. In order to do so, you have to know the dominant discourse. You cannot unsettle it, without knowing it. Because if you don't know your enemy, so-called, how would you reduce your enemy if you don't know them? Mostly what will end up happening is you will start hurting your own self. Sorry, Infinita, I haven't read his introduction to postcolonialism because it's an introductory book. I have Leela Gandhi, Robert Young, Ania Lumba's book, but I have not read Mcleod's book on introduction. So some people have quoted it to me. If it does a good job of complicating the debates, it would be good. But if you really want a good recommendation for an introductory book, that is Ania Luma's Colonialism, Postcolonialism, which I think does a great job of um, first explaining colonialism and then juxtaposing it with post-colonial theory without oversimplifying things. But I have not read his reader or his introduction to post-colonial studies. And most of the times I use introductory books to post-colonialism only when I'm teaching a course and I need a good book for it. But for me, Ania Lumba has done that job pretty well. And that's the book I use. Or Robert Young's A Very Short Introduction. Well, Owais, every video you watch, or if you go to the main channel homepage of the channel, there is a join button. And if you click on it, it will give you the options for membership. But sadly, I know it's available in India because quite a few people have become members of the channel from India. I don't know if it will work in Pakistan or not, but that's where you go and you click on it and you see what the channel offers. This is something that they usually give to channels that have 30,000 or more subscribers, but I don't know. I think maybe YouTube likes what we do on this channel, so they enabled it. Like, I don't even know, even when I had only 4,000 subscribers. And it's kind of like, I think it's a way of for them to like make help creators maybe raise some money for their channel, make it profitable, but also to create a community where not everything, of course, on this channel, there is not everything is exclusive to the members, but to create a community where people are a little more committed to what the channel is doing. We are just experimenting with it. Okay, so Manekkar, Mainak Sarkar. I can't speak on Spivak right now because I don't know which part of Spivak you want me to speak on. But I do have about 4 lectures on Can the Subaltern Speak. I only need to record one more to finish my lecture on Spivak because to me that is the most important, most cited essay of Spivak. But here is what I would say about Spivak. As a scholar, I find her to be the most formidable living scholar on this planet because of the kind of work she does. She's hard to read, but if you ever read Spivak carefully, she does with language, with her cultural heritage. I mean, that's the kind of hybridity we want, right? She knows her Hindi, she knows her Sanskrit, but then she uses that knowledge and infuses it in Western theory to a point that anyone who reads Can the Subaltern Speak, the third section where she is explaining 4 kinds of knowledge and connects it to Hindu sacred texts, right? No Western scholar can get through it without knowing that prehistory. That is an intervention. But Spivak, a lot of people forget that Spivak, by and large, is also a theorist of pedagogy throughout her works. One aspect of it that she constantly keeps highlighting is the role of humanities in creating our imaginations. This is a direct quote from Other Asias. And that is, look at her book titles, Outside in the Teaching Machine, right? So a lot of people forget to read Spivak as a pedagogue, as a theory of pedagogy person. And I think if you paid more attention to that, especially in Outside in the Teaching Machine and a few other works, and even in Other Asias, the first essay I think is about training the imaginations of our students. And I think that could be really, really helpful for people in terms of theory, but also in terms of understanding post-colonial pedagogy. Okay, actually, welcome. Malini, can you suggest any good texts about the Indian and Pakistani independence movements? Specifically, I'm trying to learn more about violent and, well, I mean, if you non-violent methods, of course, you can read, Gandhi and also the Khudai Khidmatgar movement, Bacha Khan and Frontier Gandhi. Those would be two very interesting. And in India, probably Bacha Khan is a forgotten figure. So is he in Pakistan too. Pakistanis are really good at forgetting the good parts of their own history. But I would suggest if you want to do a comparison, you pick up Gandhian readings and then find whatever is available in English on Badshah Khan, right? Because he was a Congress leader, but he was also a pacifist leader of the Khudai Khidmatgars. And that would be a really interesting and also non-violent. Uh, how did someone from the Pakhtuns of KPK, how was he able to develop a popular movement of Pathans who were pacifists, right? They were called the Red Shirts. And there are quite a few books in English on it. Oxford has a good book on it too. So I will highly recommend those that book. But other than that, if you're looking for novels and others, I mean, just do a basic research. But in terms of scholarly topic, the Gandhian influence on Bacha Khan and the pacifist movement launched by Bacha Khan and Dr. Khan Sahib would be a really good study. Okay, so if Zal says it doesn't work in Pakistan, so the join button is not available in Pakistan. So I'm sorry about that. So yes, Ram Krishnan. Yes, I am continuing to do Said's Orientalism. Actually, I am editing one of them just now, and maybe it will go live either tomorrow or day after tomorrow. But that is a long project. As you know, it's a huge book, but it's also a project that's dear to me. So I will continue recording on that, also on pedagogy of the oppressed. These are the two main topics we have going on the channel right now of reading and discussion. And then the third one, which is developing, is the Franco Berardi's The Soul at Work. So these three, I will inshallah see them through. Okay. Yeah. Good questions. Did I miss anyone's? Let me see. Okay, thank you. And yes, I know, like, it's a big book, and I was going to do like chapter summaries of it, and then when I started reading it, I realized there is no way I can do that. So I was like, okay, let's spend some time and see how long it takes to read Orientalism and talk about it. Uh, Okay, so whenever you have time, can I ask a few questions about Spivak? Like she said, she's not easy to read, though I really love her work. So I want to make sure I'm not going the wrong way. Yeah, you can go ahead and ask your questions here, and maybe it can help others as well. Um, but do keep in mind that Spivak is someone who translated Derrida. And a lot of people think that when you read of grammatology, um, the 69 page preface is actually equally as important as the original book that she translates. And she's hard to read, but all major theorists are hard to read. But I think if we read her carefully and try to understand it, she can be a transformative theorist to work with. Okay, any other questions? We're not even talking about the election. Have you noticed the US election? So So meanwhile, Mary, you had asked for Mary, remember you had asked for when we will do so fourth week of November is when Anum, you as well, we will do the webinar for members, and I will post the announcement. The time would be pretty much the same as this one, but I'll post the announcement in the community section, and that way you can all join us. And we'll have a limited conversation, but we can have just an open question answer. Okay, so here is the concept of native informant. Would you say that it changes from a subaltern position and takes multiple forms, and that identity resides in multiple people? Well, first of all, the concept of the native informant, even in her book Towards Postcolonial Reason, if you read it carefully enough, the last paragraph, let me see if I can read it here, is actually a dig at the concept of the native informant. Okay. And what does she say? It always makes me laugh when I read that last sentence. Sorry, it's a huge book. I think I picked up the wrong book. So the idea of the native informant, and she places it within the logic of neoliberal capital. People who are Indian or Pakistanis or Bangladeshis or Nigerians or Kenyans who come and study here and then adopt the corporate identities and are then incorporated within the corporate structure. So the concept of the native informant is the person who is from India, who is from Pakistan, but gets incorporated in the project of capital as such that they become a resource for the multinationals to actually exploit their native countries. And they sell their expertise as a native informant to enable these corporations to do so. That is what she means, roughly speaking, being a native informant. Or you and me getting our PhDs, right? And one role that we can play as post-colonial scholars is to be constant critics of power wherever it exists, and to promote a just, full resolution to problems from our home countries. We will still be kind of native informers because we are bringing our knowledge here to the metropolitan audiences, but we are not fully incorporated native informants because we are not using this knowledge to make a space within the metropolitan culture and then enable the powers that be over here to further subjugate people from our home countries. That's the distinction that we need to make. It is okay to work, but to work to extend the power of global corporations with your native knowledge is what constitutes a native informant. And that's the distinction. That's why I was looking for that book, because the end of the book where she's talking about one of the nieces of Bhubaneswari, the woman about whom she had written Can the Subaltern Speak, who works for a global corporation, and her family is proud that she is made an executive and wears cotton and walks bare feet and believes in natural birth. All of these are liberal habits, but at the same time works to enhance the rapacious policies of the corporation that she works for. That's the distinction that you ought to make as a native informant. So when exactly do you hold these live sessions? Well, all our live Saturday sessions start at 10 o'clock US Central Time, which now I think, I don't know what time in India would that be, but it's US Central Daylight Time, and we hold them every Saturday. And if anytime you are in doubt about whether or not we'll be having a session, all you need to do is go to the community section on the channel and the announcement will be there. Yes, I got that from, but I mean through time, like when she traces it through Hegel, like there is a transition in the native. Well, that is a very hard question for me to answer because I have to reread the book. I don't think so I'll be able to answer it. But the main insight from Hegel always is the master-slave narrative, right? And the main project in the master-slave dialectic isn't that master is master and slave is slave, but it is the slave's realization through works that he or she is actually contributing to the world in which the master is a master. And so, since the master cannot accept the slave as an equal, that repudiation happens. And it is that acceptance that changes the dialectics, right? Now, I've forgotten, I read the book quite a long time ago as to how she is connecting the two. And for that, I'll have to reread the book. Well, I mean, yes and no. I try not to do discussions on individual novels, even though I love Waiting for the Barbarians. But we'll see. But otherwise, it's too specific to just focus on one novel and then expect. Maybe in our post-colonial theory course, which is an ongoing course, eventually we will include a few novels, and maybe we'll include Waiting for the Barbarians too. Okay, Sania Shah. Sir, though I think it is quite audacious for me to speak so, but I think there is a gap in Spivak's work. Oh, well, you can say whatever you like. I mean, I don't care whether there is a gap or not. No one, Spivak doesn't have a responsibility to Muslim women. She absolutely has no responsibility to Hindu women as well. And the Muslim women, if they feel there is a gap in Spivak's work, they are welcome to challenge Spivak and write about it. I don't think so. It's Spivak's job to account for Muslim women and how other people have already done that. Chandra Mohanty has done that. Laila Abu Lughad has done that. Quite a few Pakistani scholars and Indian scholars have done that. So I won't consider it a gap because Spivak doesn't offer herself as a universal feminist or a specialist on Muslim women's predicament in it. But you can read her essay on from other Asias. If you have read your entire Spivak, there is a whole critique of Sher Bano case from India. And that to me was she addressing how religion tries to articulate within the Indian constitution the place of the Muslim Indian woman. So I hope you have read it. The Shah Bano case, my Indian friends would be pretty aware of that, what that case was. Okay, so Anom, let me go back to you. I meant that tracing the position of the native informant has resulted in a shift from a subaltern. Oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yes, and that comes really clearly, and I'm sorry, I don't really know where these questions would come from. Otherwise, I'll have my books right next to me. But that is that if you read the last part of Critique of Postcolonial Reason, that's where she very clearly theorizes that. But yes, I agree with you over there. And when she focuses on colonial period, well, I mean, Hazrat Mahal actually, everyone forgets about Hazrat Mahal. So asking Spivak to remember Hazrat Mahal is kind of funny, because the Muslim historians find me anyone other than Qurratul Ain in River of Fire in 1951 is the one who mentions Hazrat Mahal. I don't see any Muslim feminist who have recovered her work who in that time frame, 50s and 60s. No one has written about her proclamation. Hazrat Mahal was actually recovered in India in the 80s. Before that, she was silenced. Rani of Jhansi was always remembered. But I don't want to convert this Indian historiography into a Muslim Hindu thing. I am on record for publishing and writing that at one point within the Indian struggle for independence, Hazrat Mahal was one of those in my essays. Muslims and Hindus fought together, side by side, died for each other. So you can't pick up a huge oeuvre of a person and say simply because there is a silence in it uh, she is failed. I mean, I would like to see a statement in Spivak's work where she claims that she will represent all women, Muslim and Hindus and Sikhs and Bengalis. She never says that. It's not her project. If she fails to account for Muslim experiences, someone else should go and do that. You know, if you want to say it's a gap, go and fill that gap and see how Spivak responds to it. I mean, it's not she's perfect. I mean, people criticized, can the subaltern speak? And she came back and said, yes, I was wrong. But I don't look at scholars' work from the point of view of such expectation that they should carry the burden of representation of an entire continent and all its complexities. All I hope for them is to be subtle to differences. So, I think that would be my answer on Spivak. Let me see. I'm getting I'm not sure. I mean, I'm getting the news here that Biden has won. So you mean that the state of Pennsylvania has finally declared that he has the lead? I mean, the official certification will come later. So if that's the case, well, that is time for celebration for us. Cool. So maybe that will change things. That's exciting. I think I'm going to cancel my undergraduate class today after this. Okay. All right. So, Sania, sorry, I didn't mean to be dismissive of I think your query is really important. But I would approach it from here is how I train my students. What I train my students to do is that it is absolutely okay to build on other people's work, right? But we do it in a way where we say, I have read Said and Spivak's work, but I feel like that while they are discussing this, their argument could have even been more expansive if they had accounted for this. So that way, what you're doing is you're paying respect to their work, but then you're also saying, hey, you missed this. Now let me work on it. So you make that connection. I train my graduate students to be gracious, right? I don't train them to say, hey, go pick up the biggest name in your field and bring them down. No, because that doesn't produce good scholarship. So I would say, absolutely, frame your argument from here is how formidable Gayatri Spivak is, but at this moment when she's discussing so and so, right at that moment, this was also happening. Why doesn't she account for that? And if she doesn't, maybe she's not blind. Let me do that accounting for you. And so then you're augmenting a work that is better scholarship. So that was my suggestion. Oh, good. They called Pennsylvania. That's good. That's very good to know. Cool. I know it's not a revolutionary change, but it's at least a positive change. I'm so glad. Okay, Amu. I think don't mention your thesis or paper ideas here if you haven't published them. I don't know. That threat is there always in Pakistan and India. I don't care. I've shared my book ideas here and elsewhere. No one is going to steal them. And even if they do, I mean, there can be two books on the same topic. What will decide is which one is better. So I don't know. I mean, I am not that skeptical of the world. But you have to deal with the cultures wherever you are dealing with other scholars. To me, I mean, this question of what should be my thesis idea perplexes me. Like people ask me, can you give me an idea for my thesis? And it's like, how am I qualified to give you an idea for your thesis? I don't know what you've studied. I don't know what you're interested in. I don't know what your training is, right? So I guess in certain school systems, people are expected to be given a thesis topic. The way my students work is they're the ones who propose their thesis topic. They're the ones who say, I would like to write on this, and then we go back and forth, and I give them a little bit of my opinion. Uh, so I'm always perplexed when people ask me to tell them what their paper topic should be. And my idea is, well, in order to give you that, I need a lot of information, right? And better is if you say, here is my paper idea, what do you think about it? Even then, I will be reluctant to answer, because I still have to go and do research to find out whether or not it's a contemporary topic, whether or not it's original. And that's something you all can train yourselves to do. Sonia, I really appreciate, I mailed you once and you were quite good. Uh, Good. That is great. Good to know. So I'm glad I replied to your email. These days, lately, I've been kind of lazy in replying to my emails. And so I'm glad I replied to yours. Okay. But okay. So now that Anom and Infinita have broken this news about Biden. So I'm going to go and follow the news after this. So this is roughly what we will do, probably once a month, just open question answers. But we will also be doing our post-colonial studies webinar. So chances are, what the way it looks like is that 2 Saturdays we'll be focusing on post-colonialism, one Saturday for general questions and answers, and the last Saturday of the month for the channel members, greater members and above, to whom I have promised that I will do at least one webinar exclusive to them per month. So that is roughly the structure. I will probably post it in the community tab to explain it further, but that is the plan. As always, if you can send your questions to me early through the community tab or by commenting on the webinar, any webinar video, that means I can prepare in advance and answer your questions better. So, Benny, I'm finding that I'm inclined to look at post-colonialism less as theory and more as, yeah, absolutely. I think, and we should I think I answered that, but I think I went back in my conversation. So, yeah, I mean, post-colonialism, of course, is a set of theories and ways of thinking colonialism, but it can be history of colonialism, history of post-colonial nation states, their relationships amongst each other, then colonialisms within the nation itself. And then kind of thinking of a different world, right? Most of us as scholars, I always encourage my students, we should dare to imagine, right? If we will not do that, whose job it is to think on the edge of thought? If we just get caught in our religious and national and regional silos, then what's the purpose of humanistic education, right? So, okay, looks like I've answered all the questions, and all the usual suspects of every week are here, and I would like to thank all of you for joining me. And as I always say, this is not a service to you. Actually, this is deeply selfish on my part, because I find these weekly exchanges really invigorating and very heartening, and they keep me going. So it's not a public service, it's just totally self-serving. So thank you so much for being a part of my life, right, and coming and joining me here. And so the next week we will revert back to post-colonialism, and I will post whatever we'll be discussing in the community, on the community tab. And meanwhile, if you have any questions, send them my way. Okay. And let me see. Okay, good. Anum has a question, and I'll go back to it. Yes, absolutely. I had a question. Can post-colonial research include a research on theory, maybe expanding or developing it? Absolutely, but not for your dissertation. Um, uh, Your dissertation, what we are hoping is that you will finish. So we encourage you to write, a manageable dissertation. But beyond that, when you write your book, absolutely, theorize as much as you like. But I have done it in my undergraduate, in my PhD degree. Even the first article that I published was trying to theorize something, but it wasn't trying to challenge the whole field. It was trying to theorize a concept. So, based on, I think you can't make your whole dissertation into a theory project, but part of it can be theorizing a new concept and using it. But most mentors and directors at this stage in a literature department will expect you to write a traditional dissertation that deals with literary texts. And then when you go beyond that, yes, absolutely, you can theorize and coin new terms or challenge old terms. Absolutely. Okay, Omar, thank you so much. Mary, thank you. Sania, welcome back. And please do join us whenever you can every Saturday. And I think I've answered all the questions. Okay, so looks like we can conclude, and so all right. So I'm going to go and enjoy the Biden win, and you all take care of yourselves wherever you are. Be generous, be kind, take care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you next week. Okay, bye bye.